Level 1. Subtle. This level of dimethyltryptamine experiences can actually be kind of relaxing. At the lightest amounts, the effects are indistinct, but colours in the room can become brighter, vision can seem sharper, particularly when viewing fine details, you can begin to experience subtle visual drifting. Sounds, or especially music, can become just slightly more noticeable or enjoyable. The textures and pressures of your clothes, the furniture you're sitting on, or objects you're holding can become more noticeable. Your eyes might seek out patterns or notice that shapes in your surroundings resemble symbols or faces. Your mind can become prone to wandering, thinking in ideas more than in words, and perceiving the mundane as more interesting than usual. There can be some form of mild paresthesia, which are internal sensations such as slight tingling, warmth, fuzziness, or effervescence that may feel like they're moving across your skin, in your veins, or running down your spine. Level 2. Mild. At this level, the effects from level 1 become a bit stronger, more perceptible, and more distinct. Visual drifting can become more pronounced and complex. Textures and patterns can begin to mirror and replicate in your vision, which we call symmetrical texture repetition. Colours can appear to change, not just brighter, but distorting to a different hue, which we call colour distortion. Faint, yet colourful psychedelic geometry can begin to appear, especially as a closed-eye visual. Details of things you can see become more extreme, distorted, and exaggerated, which we call aesthetic distortion. Paresthesia can become more noticeable. While it may not be sedating exactly, you may be inclined to be still and quietly take in the experience. People also sometimes feel that dimethyltryptamine has a will of its own. The Subjective Effect Index has a wide category of autonomous entities. This category comprises all forms of beings that are perceived as an effect of an altered state of consciousness, and that seem to have their own feelings, thoughts, or sense of agency. A sensed presence is the perception of an autonomous entity without any specific hallucination. People may perceive a sensed presence from the dimethyltryptamine itself, that it has opinions about them, or that it may approve or disapprove of the fact that they are taking dimethyltryptamine and want them to stop or continue. Once a person has some experience with dimethyltryptamine, they may even feel that dimethyltryptamine has a mind of its own while sober. Level 3. Moderate. Even without a breakthrough, Level 3 takes you distinctly outside a sober mental state. The effects are disorientating, and depending on personality and current mental health, some may find the come-up anxiety-inducing or terrifying. Dimethyltryptamine is safer than substances like alcohol by many metrics, but it can briefly reduce or suspend a person's feeling of control over their own mind and reality. If you feel like you must rely on your own feeling of control, losing it can be quite challenging. Generally, the visual effects from previous levels will be present and intensified. Symmetrical texture repetition and visual drifting may become much more intense. An effect which we call aesthetic distillation may occur, which we define as a reduction of detail that maintains or enhances aesthetic appeal, giving the world a painterly or even cartoonish appearance. Creative external hallucinations may occur, such as transformations of objects in your environment. Visual geometry may obscure parts of your vision. The external world may become disorientating and difficult to understand due to a combination of the visual and cognitive effects. If you close your eyes, there will likely be very complex geometry, with very bright colors and high contrast designs that can shift in complex, multi-dimensional ways. A variety of internal hallucinations may also occur, even though you still have awareness of your physical body. Your impression of your surroundings may change. Even if you can see some version of the location you're in and remember things about it, it may feel like it is, in some way, a different place than before, as if some level of mundanity has been stripped from it and it is metaphysically transported. At this level, a brief but powerful sedation can set in, making your body feel heavier, like you're sinking more deeply into the furniture. You may become increasingly inclined to lay down, which becomes more overwhelming at higher levels. Your proprioception, or your internal awareness of the position of your body, may become distorted. Aspects of your body may feel as if they're drifting further away. Close to a breakthrough, you may feel less intrinsically connected to your body, even if you're still receiving sensory input. At this level, the dimethyltryptamine trip will have a defined arc of come up, peak, and come down. Different effects will surge and recede, which causes other effects to become more noticeable until the psychedelic effects evaporate altogether. Level 4. Strong. If you know this channel, you know that we take a materialist stance. We personally think that the complexity of the human brain and the strangeness of the material world can explain the psychedelic experience without necessitating the supernatural, magic, psychic powers, or alternate dimensions. Consider this a warning. Regardless of what you or I see or experience on dimethyltryptamine, we will assume that we were all simply tripping balls. That said, I'm happy to agree to disagree, and I do know some people who I view as reasonable that disagree with me on this point. At level 4, or strong experiences, the effects of dimethyltryptamine become characterized by all-encompassing geometry and hallucinatory states. The user typically feels like they have broken through into the hallucinatory dimethyltryptamine space, and the trip begins to follow distinct durational stages, which have been well documented by psychedelic communities online. Strong dimethyltryptamine experiences are typically the minimum that is considered a full dimethyltryptamine experience to many online, and the vast majority of trip reports seem to be for strong, heavy, or extreme experiences. The first stage is taking off, which culminates in breaking through. At this stage, effects become stronger until they overwhelm the experience of the sober or outside world. There are many different forms of taking off that have been reported on dimethyltryptamine, and some examples include increasingly intense geometry, which becomes so all-enveloping that the visible environment is completely blocked out and replaced. Feelings of being suddenly pushed through and onto the other side of a membrane. The environment forming into a geometry-filled tunnel, which the user moves into as it widens and subsequently encompasses their entire vision. The environment splitting into separated sections, leaving a gaping chasm filled with high-level geometry, as the user separates from their body and is then catapulted directly into it at a high speed. Waiting rooms. The second recognized stage is a waiting room. Initially after breaking through, there is sometimes a brief period of time during which the person has broken through and no longer feels that they are in the sober world, but they are not yet on the so-called other side. This stage may have hallucinatory motifs, such as being in a literal waiting room, but its primary characteristic is a feeling that a person is waiting for something, or that something is about to happen. The waiting room doesn't always take place during a breakthrough trip, which we'll go into a bit more later, and also sometimes a waiting room fizzles out and never actually pushes through onto the other side. The other side. Once the waiting room stage is either finished or skipped over, you'll typically feel that you have broken through into what is commonly referred to as the other side, or hyperspace, the third stage. An incredibly wide variety of potential hallucinatory content can manifest on the other side, but there are certain themes and archetypes that have been reported as particularly common. A common experience of this stage is that it is a hallucinated alternate reality that feels more real than everyday life, or may feel oddly familiar or accompanied with feelings of home. In regards to this, Terence McKenna is aptly quoted as saying it has the quality of an event rather than an experience. In terms of the visual aesthetic, these hallucinatory spaces, settings, and scenes are usually overlaid with or made of incomprehensibly complex psychedelic geometry. Examples of dimethyltryptamine spaces include landscapes, fractalscapes, rooms, buildings, cities, tunnels, caverns, non-Euclidean structures resembling a hive or nest, womb-like environments, and anything and everything else that the human brain is capable of rendering. Dimethyltryptamine spaces sometimes contain autonomous entities. These entities can take any form, and we will go into the statistical data on this later, but they commonly manifest as otherworldly creatures, aliens, and spirits of a colourful and geometric appearance. Entities may act as if they have been waiting for your arrival, and they are usually unfazed by the person's sudden apparition. Upon noticing you, dimethyltryptamine entities may enthusiastically greet you, but reactions of surprise, indifference, or ambivalence are also common. Entities may convey a sense of urgency, as though attempting to demonstrate a multitude of incredible things during the short amount of time that they have before the trip ends. The communication styles entities use vary significantly and may include spoken language, direct manipulation of the visual environment, choreographed movements, telepathy, information-filled beams of energy, objects that convey information, or any combination of the above, and they often present themselves as all-knowing. The messages from entities often feel personalized and related to your life or emotional well-being, but can also contain aspects that seem entirely nonsensical or ineffable when removed from the context of the experience. Even while experiencing intense hallucinations at this intensity range, you may still feel partially connected to your physical body as you traverse hallucinatory spaces. People often automatically close their eyes and allow themselves to be immersed in the internal experience. However, if you suddenly open your eyes midway through the trip, you will likely leave the hallucinatory space. At that point, the open eye visual effects will typically be less intense, but if you close your eyes again, you could either emerge back into the same hallucinatory scenario or simply experience intense psychedelic geometry for the remainder of the trip. Many report feeling surprisingly lucid and clear-headed during low-level dimethyltryptamine breakthroughs in comparison to equally intense experiences on psilocybin, mescaline, or lysergic acid diethylamide. Although they are common, it is worth noting that these entity-filled hallucinatory spaces do not occur for every person, and typically are not consistent in their manifestation between trips. A certain number of people do not seem to experience hallucinations at all, and instead simply find themselves engulfed in all-encompassing, high-level geometry during this stage of the dimethyltryptamine experience. It's also worth noting that people with aphantasia, or those who do not mentally visualize, may never experience visual effects at all on dimethyltryptamine or any other hallucinogen. After between 2 and 10 minutes of this stage, the dimethyltryptamine trip will begin to wear off and move into its fourth and final stage. The final stage concludes the trip, beginning with departure from the other side. You may feel a sensation of being pulled progressively further away from the dimethyltryptamine space. The hallucinations may become increasingly vague and ill-defined until imperceptible, or there may be some other breaking apart or disintegration of the hallucinatory space. During this process, the entities will sometimes bid farewell and encourage the person to visit again. Once the departure is complete, you will typically be back in the room where you took off, still experiencing strong visual geometry, which progressively fades. In the same way that a dream is commonly forgotten upon waking up, detailed memories of dimethyltryptamine experiences also often deteriorate once the trip has ended. This amnesia can be mitigated by quickly documenting the trip through taking notes, recounting the trip to another person in detail, recording a narration of the experience, etc., etc. Even as the overt psychedelic effects fade, you may experience a sense of being bathed in euphoria and awe, sometimes complete astonishment at what you have seen or experienced. The geometry typically fades over the course of another 5 to 10 minutes, leaving a strong body high that can persist for up to half an hour in extreme cases. Level 5. Heavy. Level 5, or heavy experiences, will generally still have about the same stages as strong experiences, but the trip will begin to be characterized by a disintegration or complete loss of your sense of self or ego, which we call absent selfhood. Instead of just breaking through to the other side of the dimethyltryptamine space, you may temporarily lose touch with what the mundane world is, what time is, and who you are as an individual. The hallucinatory visuals of the other side will sometimes increase in clarity and overall complexity. The content of these hallucinations is more likely to adopt themes that are commonly interpreted as otherworldly, alien, transcendent, or from a higher plane of existence. On the other hand, some people also report that their hallucinations do not become better defined at higher levels, but instead break down and become increasingly fast-moving, formless, rapidly shape-shifting, and incoherent. The psychedelic headspace at this level becomes even more intense, and there is a much higher likelihood of intense transpersonal states and spirituality enhancement. These states may include feelings of inextricable unity between oneself and the rest of existence, metaphysical insights into the supposed nature of reality, and feelings of deep spiritual reverence towards the universe as a whole. For more information on the full range of mystical and transpersonal experiences, please see mine and my co-writer's TLS stream. A heavy experience is the level at which the practical upper limit of what the substance is capable of producing is reached. Many people don't experience any further insights or therapeutic benefits beyond this level. Level 6. Extreme. An extreme dimethyltryptamine experience is the level at which the effects have become so powerful and pronounced that the person will typically be rendered unconscious and amnesic. At most, this level can provide similar potential psychological benefits as the previous level, but it generally cannot go beyond that. At this level, the peak will simply include absent selfhood, blacking out, and becoming unconscious for a period of time that can range anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour in extreme cases. Although extreme psychedelic states may be attractive to certain individuals, it's important to consider that this level of intensity is both less therapeutic and explorative than the previous level. However, it is also worth noting that dimethyltryptamine is considerably less dangerous at this range than most other psychedelics due to its extremely short duration and comparative lack of intense physical side effects. Someone who is inexperienced with psychedelic substances may experience anxiety and fear throughout the duration of the trip at any level. This is not an inherent attribute of the dimethyltryptamine trip, but is more likely a response to being thrust into a profoundly complex, bizarre, overwhelming, and unfamiliar situation. As with any hallucinogen, it is always safest to slowly increase an inexperienced person's amount in small increments over the course of multiple trips, at the rate which the user is comfortable with, and with sufficient time to reflect and integrate instead of just thrill-seeking in one's own brain.